Welcome to CNBC's Equity and Opportunity Forum.
One of the big challenges when it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging is a belief that hiring diverse talent is all that it takes, when really it's only a quarter of the battle.
Delivering strategies for a diverse workforce.
A more inclusive culture creates better business outcomes. We have to constantly be bringing in the most diverse set of talent that we can. When the talent comes in, we have to ensure that everyone is getting equitable access to developmental opportunities, to coaching, to mentorship, to sponsorship.
Finding opportunities for growth.
A lot of people want companies to be more responsible in their business models, be it when it comes to pollution, be it comes to fair treatment, be it comes to a more diverse workforce, more racial inclusion. And what is very clear is that if companies actually actively try to address these issues, they tend to get better financial results.
And securing an economic future for all.
We've got to continue to address the difficult issues of, if you will, wage gaps and wage inflation and the black wealth gap and the racial wealth gap, while at the same time continuing growth that's going to benefit all. We're better able to confront the difficult challenges of the American economy if we're growing.
CNBC's Equity and Opportunity Forum is sponsored by SHRM.
Hello and welcome to CNBC's Equity and Opportunity Forum. I'm Dominic Chu here at CNBC Global Headquarters, and today we're talking with leaders at the forefront of healthcare, finance, and business about creating equitable opportunities for all. Over the next hour, you'll get actionable advice on how to expand the talent pool, diversify your workforce, and narrow the wage gap. And you'll hear the business case for doing so. We invite you in the audience to join the conversation on social media. We are at CNBC Events. That's our handle on Twitter. And you can use the hashtag CNBC Equity and Opportunity to share your thoughts on today's big program. Well, let's get right to it. Inequities in the U.S. healthcare system could cost the industry $320 billion a year. That's according to a recent report from Deloitte. Now, that figure could actually balloon to $1 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars, by the year 2040, if the underlying issues we have are not addressed. Now, recently, Genentech Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer Quita Highsmith and U.S. Chamber of Commerce Senior Vice President Rick Wade sat down with CNBC's own Bertha Coombs to talk about how their organizations are working to level the playing field in health, science, and entrepreneurship.
Rick and Quita, thanks so much for joining us. You know, I grew up back in the 1900s, I like to say, and I can remember back then following the civil rights movement, there was so much momentum, and people talked about affirmative action as a way to bring more people in, to provide more equity. Now we call it diversity, equity, inclusion. Mm-hmm. But it feels like we're talking about the same things some 50 years later.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, growing up as well in the 1900s, yeah. and what were, you know, sort of some of the still vestiges of legal segregation in South Carolina. I mean, I think we all agree we made some progress, but to some extent, everything's changed, but nothing has changed. And you look at a lot of the economic data, for example, the wealth gap is still wide. Black unemployment is still twice that of white unemployment. And on and on and on. And so, you know, but the reality is diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we talk about it today, it has its roots, obviously, back in civil rights. And I think our challenge is not how we look at this today, but how we sustain it for tomorrow and how we build the kind of momentum where we see real sustainable change.
I think one of the things that intrigues me now is that people are making the business case for it. Before, it was really more the emotional case. Yeah. And it's not something that I ever would have thought the Chamber of Commerce would be talking about. Yeah,
well, we have no choice. And there's a business case. As I say all the time, it's not just a moral imperative, but there's a business case. One of our partner organizations, the W.K. Kellogg, published an exciting research report called The Business Case for Racial Equity. And here's what it says, that if we close the race opportunity gaps and inequities in America, our GDP grows by $8 trillion. That's astounding. And when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the data is very clear that companies that are more diverse are more innovative. They're more innovative, more profitable. So there is a business case to be made. Following the murder of George Floyd, we convened thousands of CEOs and business groups, not just around a conversation, but we launched what's called the Equality of Opportunity Initiative, which seeks to address policies, because there are some policies that we have to advance to help address these gaps in areas like education and employment and criminal justice, health and wealth, et cetera. But there are also some things that companies can be doing and are doing. And I was looking at some data from McKinsey following the murder of George Floyd, $350 billion committed to by the private sector. I mean, the challenge now is to actualize that and make it real. So the Chamber is helping to lead that effort in advancing this whole conversation around the business case for this work. It's the right thing to do, but it's good for our economy and it's good for companies and their profitability.
Speaking of companies, Kwika, certainly the last 3 years have definitely underscored the conversation about social determinants of health and health equity. Genentech has set a marker to achieve certain milestones by 2025. And you've just released your progress report. Where do things stand?
You know what? To the point that you both were making earlier, I believe that we have to make this more than a moment, right? This has to be a movement. This is our 1960s right now, and it is responsibilities of corporations to help us really move the needle and drive momentum. We did just launch yesterday our third Diversity and Inclusion Annual Report. It's on our website, and we've made 8 commitments towards ensuring that we are embracing the increasingly diverse world around us, whether that is from our employee population. We want to double Black and Hispanic directors and officers. In Genentech, we're based in South San Francisco. We have a very large Asian population, but that's not translating to leadership. And so we've made a goal around narrowing the gap. While we have more than 50% of our women are directors, we have not reached 50% with our officers, the very highest levels. We're close, but we still have to keep our foot on the gas. And incremental, and it's so important and instrumental to the business of Genentech. It is driving inclusive research, because we know that when we are bringing in all the patients who have disease and not just a certain segment of the population, that people can trust that the medications and the diagnostic tools that they need for their health are safe and effective in them. And we've made a number of commitments. We've got our study currently, Katori, where we're looking at the indigenous population and specifically for them, how do they access specialty care? We just closed up a phase 4 study in multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis impacts people of color, yet they are very rarely studied. And so this study is very specific in Black and Hispanic patient populations. We have another study looking at diabetic macular edema with Black, Hispanic, and indigenous populations, because companies have to do the research. If COVID taught us nothing else, people want to understand, are the products safe and effective for the groups that are going to use them, and not just one type of population?
It is one of those things that I think about as, someone who has a genetic predisposition for late-stage Alzheimer's. Yeah. And generally it's women, and people of color are the most overrepresented in terms of being afflicted, and yet not
1% of the population of people in Alzheimer's clinical research. And here's the other challenge that we have. We're moving more to a precision medicine world, meaning that we're going to be looking at genetics and genomics to make decision treatments and to find different diseases. And yet, if we think about the oldest genome in the world, the African genome, less than 1% of the genetic material available to scientists is from Africa. 91% of the genomic material available to scientists is of European ancestry. And when I started with the co-worker Advancing Inclusive Research in 2017, it was actually 88% of the genomic material available was of European ancestry. It's actually gotten worse, and it's now 2023.
What I wonder about is, how do you access some of these folks? Because I know, I did a story about some folks being recruited by one of your competitors for an Alzheimer's trial. And part of it is building trust.
Yes.
You know, certainly, even if you don't know about the Tuskegee experiment, certainly people have experienced a sense that the medical community often, if you're poor, if you're not of means, doesn't necessarily treat you the same way.
Yes. You know, what's really important is, one, we can't blame the patients of color for not wanting to participate in the research, right? Because if we think about where are most of the hospitals, medical centers, they're not in the hood. And we talk about, people of color.
Or in rural areas
in rural areas that, they need to eat this, that, and the third. There ain't no Whole Foods, right, in some neighborhoods. And due to redlining, right, there's oftentimes not pharmacies, easy transportation to places. One of the things that we've done at Genentech is we've started this Advancing Inclusive Research Site Alliance. We've got to go to where the patients are. So we're in Birmingham, we're in LA, we're in Memphis, we're in Chicago, we're in the Bronx, and a number of other cities. And we're working with trusted centers who have established relationships with the community, who are going to stay in the community, because the one thing that we cannot do is go in and out, right? Because then people don't trust you. And so part of the opportunity is for companies to partner with community organizations, partner with the chamber, partner with others, advocacy organizations, to build trust in communities.
At the same time, we're at a point where companies that try to take more social stances are also finding pushback. How hard is it to navigate these days in the business community to try to say we're committed to these ideals and yet have other people say, oh, you're too woke, or criticize that you're being too focused on those issues and not business itself?
Well, listen, I think the message is that, yes, we are awakened to the value proposition that this is good for our economy. And that's what we lead on. And I think when you see companies like Genentech and the work that Quita is leading, I mean, that's the kind of work that we have to stay focused on, where we can see real impact and change. And to steer away from the political football and rhetoric that's taking place. We're staying true to making the business case for this work. And I think that's the direction that we have to go with this. It's good for companies, it's good for our economy, it's good for local communities. You know, the reality is that people of color by 2050 will be the majority of the workforce. So it makes sense that we invest in initiatives now to close the skills gap, because we know that black students aren't competing at the same level in math and science. So let's solve
and Latinos,
those problems.
right?
And
Latinos are creating businesses at a faster rate than the overall economy.
That's exactly right. And speaking of business, black women, 17%. At a faster rate of black women business growth than any other sector in America. Let's support and invest in businesses today, because they will be providing and creating the jobs of the future. But we got to unleash capital. Less than 1% of venture capital goes to black and Hispanic founders. We've got to solve for that. We got to make sure that black and minority-owned businesses get access to the 95% of consumers who live outside of our borders. So these are the kinds of initiatives and the kinds of efforts that we're advocating in the work that we're leading at the Chamber across the country. And again, it's good for our economy.
Thank you both, Rick, Quita, for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our thanks to Bertha Coombs, Quita Highsmith, and Rick Wade. By the way, that was only part of the conversation. You can actually watch the full, uncut interview on our website, cnbc.com/equity opportunity events, or just scan the QR code that you're seeing on your screen right now. We will post all of today's content on our website for your on-demand viewing. Well, coming up next, narrowing the gender and racial wealth gaps with TIAA President and CEO Tashonda Brown Duckett. She joins us live in just a minute.
To know where you're going, you must know where you've been. Every mile marks a moment in history. For 75 years, SHRM has led HR to drive change. We fight for women at work, shape policy and protections for all. We advocate for an inclusive workforce and endure together during unprecedented times. Because the beauty of the road is there's always something ahead. Join SHRM on our journey to drive change. Hello, I'm Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. A major obstacle to building a robust economic future for all is societal brokenness, the collective sense of feeling fractured, polarized, not belonging. We possess an ingrained need to belong. And when that need is met in our homes, our schools, and our workplaces, people respond. Forced isolation, loneliness, and a steep decline in mental well-being have impacted society and the workforce in ways that we're still uncovering. Might I suggest some everyday fixes to societal brokenness? 1, being intentionally inclusive, practicing extreme listening, and engaging in empathy, both inside and outside of the workplace. While these may seem like small steps, every great journey begins with one step in the right direction. Make it a part of your daily walk.
Welcome back. According to our next guest, the United States is facing a retirement crisis. Yes, a crisis. 40% of Americans risk running out of money in retirement, and 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire at all. Tashonda Brown Duckett, president and CEO of TIAA, joins us now to share her company's mission to increase retirement savings and close the racial retirement gap. She is joined by CNBC's senior personal finance correspondent, Sharon Epperson. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Dom. Tashonda, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to talk to you about this very important topic because so many people are worried about their retirement right now. They're worried about their money overall. When I think about TIAA, I think about the long history, over 100 years of providing guaranteed lifetime income and insurance to teachers and educators back then, now about 5 million clients. But there's no safety net like that anymore for people. American workers are concerned about the responsibility they have now to provide for their own retirement, whether it's their 401k, their 403b if they're educators, their IRAs. And then they're also worried about their everyday money. They're worried about, one of our surveys from CNBC just showed that only 13% of Americans are very confident in the U.S. banking system. So all of this is creating stress, anxiety, worry over money. What are the steps that people should be thinking about taking right now to cope?
Well, wow, it's a pleasure to be here, Sharon. And when I think about the problem, just to really frame it, today we have a $4 trillion savings gap in our country. 40% of all Americans run the risk of running out of money. And as you look at minorities or women, that number is even more pronounced. 54% of African Americans do not have enough saved to maintain their lifestyle in retirement. So there is a real problem. And when you think about the root cause, we know that particularly for people of color, we've struggled in our country with structural and systemic issues that caused a real wealth gap. When you look at Black families, 85% less wealth accumulation than compared to white families. In the backdrop of what's going on today, where so many Americans are making really tough decisions. So what can we do? As you mentioned, when it comes to retirement, it is so important, especially in this environment, that we stay the course. And the way in which we can stay the course is to make sure that we are all providing access to in-plan workplace benefits that gives exposure to saving while you're working, to be able to make it easy to be able to save so that you are taking the necessary steps to have a secure retirement long term while you're managing the changing environment and high stress environment that we're dealing with today.
But understanding how to take the appropriate amount of risk to make sure that your investments last as long as you do in a very volatile environment at a time when many people are struggling just for day to day is difficult. I'm thinking about the recent data that the TIAA Institute and George Washington University came up with that talked about how little money people have outside of non-retirement savings for a month, or the difficulty they have in making ends meet for just 1 month. So how then are they supposed to figure out how to then save for retirement? Is it the fact that we need to have more financial education at work about what's available to them, but also how they manage day to day?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot when you're dealing with the environment that so many Americans are facing. But when I think about, and you hit on this, the importance of financial education, it absolutely is critical. We know that when you know better, you do better. We know that and the study shows that when people have financial education, they're prepared and equipped to make smarter decisions, even in a tough and challenging environment. But of course, education is not enough. We have to make sure that we're addressing the income inequality. And we also have to make sure that with education becomes access and ease of access. So what do I mean? As you become more educated about your balance sheet, your personal balance sheet, as you talk to a financial advisor to say, let's look at what I'm bringing in today and how can I take a look at my current bills, but also I need to make sure that I have that rainy day fund. And I need to make sure that I can continue to save for my retirement. How do we make it easy? And that's why I say that an in-plan work plan benefit is one step where you auto-enroll someone, where they are in, where they can continue to increase, knowing that when times get hard, if they need to opt out, they can, but doing everything that we can to make it easier with that knowledge to stay the course, to stay on track, especially when you're dealing with volatile markets. You want to stay the course. You want to make sure that you are educated, you're meeting with an advisor so that you can weather the storm and continue to stay on track with your goals.
Yeah. When I think about the disparities, though, and in terms of retirement savings between blacks and Latinos and whites, with blacks and Latinos so much further behind, I also think about the creation of small businesses, the creation of entrepreneurship, and the place where people of color are really advancing quickly. And there, they don't have the luxury sometimes of an employer having a retirement savings plan for them. So how do you build wealth when you don't have a 401k, when you're an entrepreneur, and as many people of color, many women are doing today?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We know that half of Americans do not have access to a workplace benefit. And so when I think about solutions, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take the thought leaders, policy, to make it easier for small businesses to provide workplace plans for their workers, as well as making sure that the product solutions are available and the education is there. How do we make sure that when you are that entrepreneur, that you are aware of retirement solutions like an IRA that you can take advantage of? How do we make sure that the education is there for you in a way that's easy to understand and easy to access the products, the tools, and solutions? So there's work on the policy side to make sure that more small businesses can provide workplace benefits. And I think it's important that we continue to make sure that we're educating entrepreneurs, because remember, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And education and understanding what to do with that dollar for not just today and not just for tomorrow, but as we think about building wealth, particularly in minority communities, African Americans, how do we also transfer? So we have to think about it in a holistic way and making sure that we're reaching not just those that are in workplace benefit options, but also how do we make sure that those options can be available for entrepreneurs and small business owners.
And understanding that adults need this education just as much as children. I mean, we're looking at the states and the large number, the majority of states that don't even provide financial education in schools. So workers are getting to the workplace.
That's right.
This is where they're learning how to make sure they make the most of what they make.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if I think about progress, 21 states, I believe, provide or require personal financial education as part of a course to graduate. Clearly, we need to make sure that in those states is that curriculum provided everywhere, regardless of zip code. And we need to make sure that all states can make sure that we're providing financial education, strong curriculums in school. But as you said, it can't stop there. How do we make sure that all of us that are running companies are providing education and making it available? But it's not enough, Sharon, to just have it. It is our responsibility to make sure that we say, are our employees engaging? Are they using the information? Is it helpful? Are we providing time? Are we making it in snackable bites? Because people are really busy and have to have little information to consume each step of the way. So are they engaging the information in a way that they're taking action? And the action can be, are they able to save more? Are they able to have that $400 in case of an emergency? And are they on track to not just take part in the benefit that we may be offering, but are they maximizing that benefit and taking advantage of the match and really getting on a path to a secure retirement? So education early, yes. Education in the workplace, absolutely. Engagement and making it easy for people to take advantage of that education and turn it into solutions. We have to make sure that we're looking at that information too.
That kind of engagement can help people's understanding of some of the difficult decisions that you have to make when you're deciding what to do with your money, how much to save, where to save it. And one of the things that comes up frequently every year, the TIA Institute does this financial literacy survey. It is Financial Literacy Month now in April. And it's interesting to me that every year it seems that comprehending risk and insurance issues, insuring your money, protecting your money, those are the areas that people are really have a difficult time grasping, particularly Blacks and Latinos.
Well, wow, it's such a great point, especially in this environment where you see inflation is high. There's a lot of uncertainty. You're thinking about, you know, do I have to time my retirement? What does that mean? And so when we think about education, we have to also have a conversation, not just about investments, but also insurance. How do we make sure that people can have access to guaranteed income? Social Security was never designed to be the only protection. And clearly, we've had defined benefits, the closest thing to a pension, but that is rapidly declining. What we do, as you said earlier at TIAA, what we've done for over 100 years is make sure that we're providing an in-plan annuity that is part of your allocation so that you have investments and you have insurance, an in-plan annuity that can help you provide a lifetime income check that you cannot outlive. And that is absolutely an important part, and it's something that we've been doing for over 100 years and continue to do to make sure that we're serving the participants that we serve. And so when I think about solutions for everyone, and when I think about African Americans and Latinos, et cetera, I think it's important that the education has to be comprehensive and complete. It has to make sure that we're talking about saving, investing, but we're also talking about the guarantee, because there's real longevity risk that we have to make sure that we are tackling.
But I wonder how many workers, how many Americans of all races understand that when you look at the market volatility, yes, in the stock market, but then people were surprised to see volatility. It can happen, yes, it can, in the bond market, that there are now other options that they have for their retirement savings plans. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think when people hear the word annuity, they get worried because they remember stories of decades ago. But there have been policy changes to make it more accessible, more flexible.
Well, no, you hit that. And what we've been doing for over 100 years is an in-plan annuity, low cost, great value. And when you think about it, yes, even bonds have volatility. And so what is the importance of having an in-plan low cost annuity that is part of the allocation, does not increase the cost to the participant, but what it provides is cognitive risk. It covers longevity risk and market volatility. It's a level of constant opportunity to know that you will not make less. And so it's a protection. And it provides you that guaranteed income, that paycheck for life. And so that is very important. And what's been terrific, as you noted, is the Secure Act 2.0, which was a bipartisan, because this is an American issue, regardless of where you live. It's all of us that are being impacted. Having policy that makes it easier for in-plan benefits to take advantage of an in-plan annuity as part of your allocation. That will make it easy for people. So yes, education, but how do you make it easy? And with 2.0, it's providing the ability to have an in-plan solution when you think about annuities, low cost. And the policy is also providing opportunities for auto enrollment into those benefits and auto escalation, because we know making it easier, the statistics show, when people auto enroll, even with the flexibility to opt out, they stay the course, and then making sure they're building over time so that they're maxing out their contribution and being on a path to have a secure retirement.
And the concern by some that may say, well, why would you auto enroll or auto escalate retirement savings at a time that people are having difficulty making ends meet? Why is it still important to do that?
It's important in any economic environment, but remember, they still have choice. And so with that individual, if they are sitting here saying, wow, I have to make a tough decision, and that happens in this environment, you have the choice to be able to opt out. But what we do know, and what the data has shown, is that when you make it easy and people are opting in towards their retirement, they're using that as the very last resort, which is good because you want that retirement to build. So when you need it at time of retirement, when you are not working, You want to make sure that those dollars are there and that you've been able to accumulate those dollars for decades. It's important to stay the course, but again, there is option for those who may need to make a different decision when they're dealing with a real economic issue.
I'm still thinking of those that are really just concerned right now about making sure they have the pay to be able to afford what they need to do day to day. And so before one can save for retirement, you have to have the income to be able to do that. So the issue that is faced by many people of color, many women, of not having equal pay, how does that impact what the long-term financial future is going to be for Blacks, Latinos, women?
Absolutely.
Many that are underrepresented.
No, you're absolutely right. As we think about the fact that women make 30% less or have 30% less in retirement, we know the disparity on the dollar when it comes to women and African Americans and Hispanics and other minorities. We have to address the income gap. And so when I think about what we can do as CEOs in business, we can do 4 things. One, we can make sure that we understand that, yes, talent is created equally, opportunity is not. And so when we look at the composition of our workforce, do we see a disproportionate of women or people of color at the lower rung, and are they not moving up? And if they're not, that's that broken rung. But we have to have a mindset and belief that talent is created equally. Secondly, we do have to disaggregate the data, so that we're not just saying 50% of my workforce are women or X% is Hispanic or African American, but where are they? And by disaggregating the data, we can see, are they on a path to have income earning potential? Are they moving up? And if not, why not? Are they in tech? Or are they in asset management? What aspects of my business do I see that number growing, or do I not see it growing in a way that we know that there's higher income earning potential? And that leads us to policies and practices. It's talking about reskilling the workforce and saying, these are the jobs of today and tomorrow. How do we take our existing workforce and make sure that they have access to taking a course, a cyber course at a university that we pay for, so that while they're doing today's job, they're getting the skills to put them in the best position to get promoted and have mobility, particularly when we're talking about women and people of color. And then lastly, we have to look at the outcome. It is not enough to say that we have great programs. It is not enough to say that we have all of these benefits. We have to make sure that everyone is participating. And when they're not, we're not going to get the outcome that we derive. So it's not enough to have the program. We have to be intentional. We have to make sure we're engaging, and we have to make sure that we're disaggregating the data to say, where are we not seeing representation and what can we do about it to improve the outcome? Because we do believe talent is created equally, opportunity is not. It's when we do those things, we're able to then have more African Americans have higher earning potential that can then allow more African American families to be able to have more disposable income, to be able to save and invest and hopefully transfer wealth and not debt to the future generation.
Exactly. Those points that you made about making sure you have the data, making sure you take track of the outcomes is critical for retirement savings also. It's not enough to offer, as you're saying, an employee a 401k plan without tracking how are they using it, how does that differentiate between different races, between men and women, and what can we do to make sure that everyone is educated about how best to do that. And so as we're looking at making sure that we have the pay gap, trying to focus on that we're focused on making sure that people have the right skills to increase their pay. And we're looking at the retirement savings. There's something that you brought up that I think a lot of people don't think about, and that is the longevity risk of what is going to happen with the money that you have saved. So how do people who often, that is not a discussion, right? And many people say, how am I supposed to figure that out? How does that work into making sure that you have enough?
That's right. Well, when we think about the gaps, I break it into 3 areas. It's the access gap that we talked about. How do you make it accessible for everyone? The savings gap, and then the guarantee gap. The guarantee gap is precisely about addressing the longevity risk. You cannot time your how long you're going to live. But what you can do is have a guaranteed level of income in addition to Social Security that can give you the confidence that no matter how long you live, you will have a paycheck coming in to help you with your everyday expenses. And that, to me, is very important to include when we're talking about solving the wealth gap across all minorities and all sectors of the population.
Absolutely. There's so many opportunities. We're always talking about the disparities. Yes. And what I appreciate in this conversation is that you were talking about solutions and the opportunities that are available to everyone, but that many people of color may not be aware of or may not have taken full advantage of. But now we know what to do.
Absolutely.
Because Tashonda Brown Duckett told us what to do.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Tashonda.
Thank you.
Dom, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
So Tashonda, Sharon, first, thank you both very much for those very intriguing thoughts. Sharon, I wonder if I might ask you. You cover so many different personal finance topics here for us at CNBC and for NBC News. One of the things that we often talk about is this idea that so many of these investing opportunities that we talk about on our air, on MSNBC, on NBC News, aren't really that accessible to everybody out there. One of the ideas being floated around by some is that every child that's born in America starts off with, say, an X $100 or $1,000 fund starting from birth for them to accumulate wealth over time. Is there any feeling in your mind that those types of things would help with closing some of these investing gaps, to help with some of those, at least, gaps that we see amongst certain income parts of the spectrum versus others?
Well, one of the things that I think is very important about what you just raised in terms of providing funding for young children to start saving and investing is critical to building wealth, because we know the earlier you start and the more regularly you save, it's quite important to do so. And that's why we're seeing different places around the country starting not necessarily at birth, but school districts starting or schools starting in elementary school with students getting access to a 529 plan so that they can start saving for college. Of course, now that money is going to be earmarked for college, not for retirement. But yes, it is very important to start early. And I think more and more people are talking about the ability to get young people to save. More and more people are talking about the ability to get young teens who are earning money in their jobs, contributing to a Roth IRA that their parents helped them set up. All of these things are important to the discipline of saving and investing. All
right. CNBC's Sharon Epperson, Tashonda Brown Duckett, thank you both very much for all the help there and for shedding some light on that retirement income gap. Now, as many of you know, April is Financial Literacy Month. And as part of CNBC's continuing coverage, Sharon will be hosting our Women and Wealth event next Tuesday, April 11th, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, she'll be joined by an incredible roster of financial experts, some of whom you're seeing right there, including Susie Orman, Winnie Sun, Patrice Washington, and many more as well. You can register to attend at cnbcevents.com, or alternatively, just scan the QR code that you see on your screen right there. And Sharon, of course, we will look forward to seeing you there hosting that event. Now let's turn to the topic of leadership. According to data from Institutional Shareholder Services, or ISS, S&P 500 companies are missing the mark when it comes to representation on their boards. Just take a look. Despite being 19% of the U.S. population, Hispanic board members make up only 5% of board seats, while white board members make up 78% of those seats, despite being only 63% of the population. So how do we close these gaps and make corporate boards more representative? We've got a panel, and we can ask. Esther Aguilera, President and CEO of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. Also, Linda Akutagawa, President and CEO of Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, Mike Hyder, President and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council, and Sid Wilson, President and CEO of the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility. This is an amazing grouping of CEOs that are going to help us lay out the leadership case. Esther, if we might start with you, what exactly do these numbers tell us about the state of diversity in corporate America, especially when it comes to the executive ranks and the board ranks?
Thank you, Don. It's great to be here. Well, look, the first takeaway is the shockingly low number of Latinos on corporate boards. But let's get to some of the other takeaways. So, first, corporate America is not capitalizing on the immense business case of having racial and ethnic leaders in roles that are driving business decisions. Did you know that $660 billion of unlocked talent and unlocked spend for Latinos is out there. The Latino consumption rate is growing at 6% annually, double the rate of the general population. So corporations without Latinos on the board are leaving money and perspective on the table. You know, a second takeaway for me is there's ample talent. You know, I would tell folks, seek out business networks like the Latino Corporate Directors Association. You know, we bring together experienced directors as well as highly qualified executives for the boardroom that have the business acumen and to add value to your board.
Okay, Linda, those are some interesting points that are being brought up there. One of the issues that we have is exactly how we get people to some of those positions. It's not like there's a roadmap necessarily. There isn't a clear-cut blueprint as to how somebody with the talent or qualifications for being on a board actually gets to that board service level. What exactly do you think could be one of those, I guess, blueprints for how people of color can make inroads into some of those types of closed-door settings?
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for having me on. And I agree with everything that Esther just said. I think there's a lot of, untapped talent that's out there that's being left on the table. And I think definitely looking at various networks that are out there. I know that LCDA, or Latino Corporate Directors, is part of a Diverse Directors Coalition in which there are lots of different corporate board members from diverse backgrounds that are, part of the network that could be tapped into. There are the networks like the Alliance for Board Diversity, which my organization, LEAP, as well as ELC and HACER are part of, and we have networks of executives that are very well qualified to sit on these corporate boards. And I think these are opportunities that are being missed out there, and we're ready to help. And we're looking for opportunities to really help diversify these boards.
Linda, if I might follow up on that, is there a way, though, for people to get in touch more easily with pipeline organizations like that? Are there almost, I guess you could call them camps? Are there ways for people to go through programs to learn more about the types of offerings that there are, and perhaps even to learn a little bit more about how they can craft aspects of their career to become more attractive as board members in the future for whatever type of organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a lot of resources out there. I know Stanford and Harvard both have programs, as well as Ascend has Pinnacle has a director's leadership boot camp, I believe. But more importantly, I think you asked an important question. What should people be doing ahead of time? And I think, if you're not really thinking early enough about what you want from the future of your career, you may not be positioning yourself properly for a corporate board position and making it so that you're attractive to these corporate board recruiters, the board nom-gov chairs, perhaps even the different search firms that are also helping to place board members onto boards. And so I think, for anybody who's watching right now and you're, let's say, mid-career or even starting out your career, as much as it may seem like it's a long way, start thinking about what it is that you're going to be doing that you think will help you to position. Get your mentors, get your sponsors out there, helping you to think through what it is that you should be being very intentional and strategic about in terms of the choices, the kind of skills that you acquire, and also building those relationships. And I think ultimately it does come down to relationships, Dom.
So relationships are very important in these kinds of situations. Mike Hyder, there have got to be qualities or certain aspects, things that people can look to towards their professional development that make them those attractive board candidates. I wonder, in your professional circles, in your professional experience, Mike, what exactly does constitute a good member of a board of directors, or somebody who can offer insights to a board, whether they be corporate or nonprofit? What exactly do they have to do in terms of best practices to make them the best possible board member that they can be?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be here as well. Thanks for the question. I think it's important just to sort of level set the fact that board director participation is basically, being a part of a strategic team that has fiduciary responsibility for oversight of an organization. And so what people who are interested in being on boards ought to be really clear about is developing a body of work in whatever profession they happen to be in, where they're recognized for global contribution at a very strategic and significant level. And a lot of times I've seen people who are interested in boards sort of focus most of their attention on wanting to celebrate the various jobs that they've accumulated as opposed to the contributions that they've made. Because boards typically are looking for people who are going to be adding significant value in helping the organization that happens to be a part of that board to grow. And so anything that one can do to demonstrate that they've made a significant difference in advancing the benefits of any organization they happen to be working in is a differentiator that people just need to be more focused around.
Sid, this brings up an interesting point about the types of contributions that can be made from people of color, from people of diverse backgrounds. One of the things that a lot of at least strategists at the corporate level have talked about is the idea that bringing diversity or bringing diverse viewpoints to the boardroom, to the executive ranks, is actually good for business. Can you take us through the types of issues that future board members will face in the coming years, given what we're seeing in the current business dynamic and how we're viewing the globalized economy, the way that things are shaping up right now?
Well, thank you, Dominic. And buenas tardes, mi gente. It's great to be here with all my esteemed colleagues. I love your question because one of the things that's so important to understand when you are serving on a corporate board, and I've experienced myself having served on corporate boards myself, is one is how do you make sure that you have an effective chief executive officer? It's one of the most important characteristics of a functioning board of directors. Secondly, is you are looking at the dynamics of what your competitor landscape is, how to make sure that you are improving your business and opportunities, and making sure that you do have those diverse perspectives. It's one of the reasons why we know that having diverse board directors, having people of color, and I want to say particularly having women of color on these boards will be able to provide those dynamics. But Dominic, here's the big challenge. The big challenge is that under today's corporate structure, it goes like this. Show me your resume, I'll show you a mid-level manager job. You show me your sponsorship, I'll show you the C-suite. You show me your credibility, and I'll show you a board seat. Because remember that it's not just skill set, it's not just experience, it's the wisdom of that experience, which comes from credibility, a function of your achievements multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility, equals your credibility. And so we know that corporate America must do a better job of acculturating to us, rather than asking people of color to assimilate to an existing corporate structure, which is why sometimes when you hear the complaint that people of color aren't always the right fit, qualifications, all these typical buzzwords that we hear, and that is common when you have an assimilation corporate structure. And so at HACER, the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility, we have been all over the country and all over the world. We just came back from the World Economic Forum just a few months ago, really making that case that corporations must acculturate, not ask us to assimilate, because we are proud people. When we come to a board, we bring our full, authentic selves, and when we do that, we can make that difference and make sure that that true business case can be realized.
You know, Esther, this is an interesting or at least curious balance that many potential board members, no matter who they are going to have to kind of walk, that kind of fine line. That is to say that they can bring some of those great, insightful, out-of-the-box thinking type, at least paradigms to corporate boardrooms, while at the same time doing so in a way that kind of builds a little bit on that collectiveness that boards often have. How hard is it to find that balance so that people of color, minorities, people from diverse backgrounds can make those contributions while at the same time do so in a way that gets people to feel like it's more team building rather than coming in and trying to bust things apart?
Absolutely, Dom. Thank you for the question. So, in a boardroom, the role of directors is to ask smart questions and to probe so that they are providing and adding value to the company and shareholder value. And the bottom line is you bring your whole self, both your immense experience in corporate America, in industries and functional expertise, all of that business acumen that you were hired to the board to bring. And you can ask questions around how, again, new market opportunities. How is the company looking at new market opportunities that are here in our own backyard? Because you're asking it simply because you're a fiduciary of the company. It's your responsibility. Again, as I mentioned at the top, do not leave money on the table. So it's just a matter of asking smart questions about what are we doing about these markets and point to some key research. The data I cited was from the McKinsey report of the Latino economy and the state of Latinos in the economy in America. And so there's plenty of research that speaks to the value to the company. This is a value, and it's how you ask the question. So it's very doable. You bring both things, the value, bringing on directors that come from our various communities. You get multiple wins. That business acumen, that insight, both international, global, and you bring these other perspectives that others in the board may not, and asking some smart questions about possibly, where there are new markets. It's up to the executives to follow up and report back.
Now, Linda, those points are well taken, but they also provide a number of hurdles that a lot of folks, regardless of who they are, have to kind of overcome to kind of breach those boardroom doors and get hurt in those levels. What do you think in your mind would be the toughest thing for people of color, people of diverse backgrounds, women, people who are underrepresented in the boardroom to have to overcome to make them appear as though they are viable candidates for a corporate board?
I'll just say I think part of it is just being different. I think that let's look at it this way. I mean, it's human nature. I mean, they want to be with people that they feel comfortable with and that they feel like are like them. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I think both as women and also as people of color, and when you're the combination of both, that becomes even more difficult. We're assumed to be very different and that likely there's not going to be a whole lot of commonality. And I think that there's hesitation, especially, I'm going to say, in this kind of current environment that we're in. I think there's concerns about people, about what they say, how they say it. And I think they're really not looking at it in a way of how can I get to know people and how can I learn from this person, that they're a human being just like me and that our differences are probably much smaller than where our commonalities are, and the benefits that we'll gain as a board is going to be so much more greater. And I think that's going to become that is currently and still will continue to be one of the biggest challenges. And I think being able to then be intentional about searching for those people who come from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different styles, that is going to help drive a board to be even better, especially, I think, in a much more global environment. Even though I feel like there is more nationalistic tendencies now, I think, for a company to really thrive, you've got to really be able to understand and look, much more broadly. And I think that's where diverse board members are going to be extremely beneficial to, these large corporations, especially if they want to continue to thrive in an uncertain economic environment.
Speaking of that uncertain economic environment, that environment in the markets, everything else that's happened as of late, between a possible banking and financial crisis to a growth slowdown, possible recessions, not here in the U.S., but possibly abroad as well. Mike, I wonder, in your estimation, what exactly do corporate boards look like in, say, the next 2, 5, 10 years? What exactly do people have to do to make themselves the best possible board members they can be in the board of the future?
Well, I think let me open with the point that I think one of the biggest misperceptions I believe that I've seen is the assumption that there's very little or few quality options of board candidates available that happen to be people of color or women, which is not true. And if you're focusing on skills and contribution in terms of expertise, as in mergers and acquisitions or technology or in cyber or in consumer products or financial services expertise, independent of whether you are a CEO or have a P&L responsibility, there is a lot of talent that's available to help organizations navigate through the complexities of the market that are coming, as you well articulated, Dominique. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that this market and the challenges are actually going to help accelerate the opportunity to looking at people who may not have traditionally been considered for board opportunities because of the expertise that they happen to offer that will help the organization grow and develop faster in the face of all of the uncertainty in the economy.
And Sid, to you here before we kind of conclude these kind of with these remarks. Sid, I wonder in your mind what exactly is the best quality that you could bring to a board if you are a person who is underrepresented. We've talked a lot about these are S&P 500 companies that we've referred these stats to, but not every board member is at the S&P 500 level. How do we kind of get that message out to smaller and medium-sized companies as well?
So, Dominic, my answer is going to rattle some feathers because I'm going to share with you a big misconception. The big misconception is every white man serving on a Fortune 500 corporate board is qualified. The reality is, having been in this industry for 30 years, I think you and I can name many, many people who probably did not belong on that board but got there because someone sponsored them on their board. Meanwhile, you have very, very qualified, very accomplished people of color that can serve on these boards. The big challenge is that in this current corporate environment, corporations will protect their corporate culture even if it's at the expense of business growth. I have example after example after example of when we see those examples, and we have to call companies out when they are not really leaning in towards creating that inclusive culture. Just some quick statistics, just so you know. 60% of all board directors tend to be CEOs or executives. 20% are those with strong finance experience. The last 20% is everybody else. 2/3 are chosen by word of mouth. 1/3 are chosen by search firms. The average age of your first board is 58. The average age of all board directors is 61. And so when you factor all those things in together, you can see where corporate America has yet to really adjust and amend and acculturate into our communities. And one last thing, Dominic, which is an area where at HACER we have a very major concern, is that we think there is a sponsorship crisis. Often, if you're a white man, then you stay on what I call the power path. The power path are those positions that go into those C-suites that lead up to the CEO, CFO, COO, CMO, general counsel, etc. And too many people of color are being driven into what I call the cul-de-sac strategy, meaning that you go into a cul-de-sac position, maybe promoted into a cul-de-sac position, but then when it's time for you to move over into a power role, you either have to move down and then move back up, or in many cases, people leave. And at HACER, we've done research on this, particularly for Latinas, and we're seeing this challenge that we're seeing. So corporate America needs to support power position, pipeline diversity and inclusion, so that way today we can have more than just 2 black women serving as Fortune 500 CEOs. We can have more than 1 Latina serving as a Fortune 500 CEO. But this this is going to require a change in the culture on the board of directors and making sure that they are acculturating, not assimilating.
All right, these are all important conversations to be having right now. Sid Wilson, thank you very much. Linda Akutagawa, thank you very much. Mike Hyder, thank you very much. And, of course, to Esther Aguilera, you as well. Thank you very much, all, for being here and sharing your thoughts on a very important topic for the next 10 to 20 years of corporate boards, not just here in America, but around the world as well. Well, this concludes CNBC's Equity and Opportunity Forum. I want to thank all of our speakers today, all of our moderators as well, and all of you for joining us. Now, if you'd like to rewatch any of today's content or share it with your colleagues, we will post all of these interviews on our website, cnbc.com/equity opportunity events. Or again, just scan that QR code that you're seeing on your screen. That'll take you right to that link for this website. Now, we hope you'll join us for CNBC's Women in Wealth event next Tuesday, April 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, hosted by our own Sharon Epperson, CNBC's senior personal finance correspondent. You can register to attend by scanning that QR code or visiting cnbcevents.com. On behalf of the CNBC Events team, thank you very much for joining us here for Equity and Opportunity. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.